Okay, so moving on with this series on hand loading ammo. I ended the last series, I had actually 350 45 ACP rounds that I had done, and I got a little carried away. On top of that, I went ahead and started with some 40 Smith & Wesson as well. So because my projectiles came in a little quicker for the 40, I kind of jumped into that a little earlier. So that's what we're going to go to right now. One of the things I didn't explain in previous videos was on the breech lock kit. I actually got a whole bunch of these bushings to make it a little bit easier, which is the whole purpose of having a breech lock kit. So the instructions on how to put each die into place is really easy, so I'm not going to go over that. But with these bushings in place, I do know that pretty much I can just set this guy in here like so and turn it, get it locked, and it's good to go. I don't have to worry about moving it in and moving it out. So that's pretty much that. And then with my 40 Smith & Wesson, I did the same thing I did with the 45, which is deprimed them, resized them. This is after they've been tumbled and cleaned. And then I cleaned the primer pocket by hand. So I have 50 rounds right here ready to go. So that's what we're going to do right now, is work on priming and belling the case mouth. So even though I didn't use this for anything, I'm just going to pull it out real quick. Go right here. I'll get my resizing die. Let's get it matched up here. Again, these have all been previously put into their correct place. So the step that I've been using that seems to be that's successful for me is been using this tool, this primer tool, on the press itself. So I'm going to grab some primers here and we'll get it going. Alright, so rule number one when dealing with your primers is you want to make sure you have your safety equipment. So I want to protect those eyes. Right now what I'm going to be using for this is going to be the Federal small pistol primers. And what I do is just kind of dump them in a tray. And very important, what I'm going to do also is take a projectile that I have that I'm using. This 165 grain Montana Gold bullet. So that's what I'm going to be setting up here today. So I get this thing started, and I'll grab one of my primers here. Make sure it's properly seated. Go ahead and bring it up. And you can kind of feel the tightness as it goes in there. Then I want to go through and I want to check it. I want to make sure that the primer is seating properly. Should be recessed just a little bit. And then I will take my projectile and make sure it's something that I can get started just a little bit. So now that I know that it's the mouth of the casing is belled, I'll go ahead and put this in here and then keep track of where I'm at in order. So then I'll go to the next one. Check it, and I'll check a couple of them with, I always check how the primers seat, but as far as checking the case mouth, if it's good for one, it's usually good for all. So now what I'll do is I'll just bust through about 10 or so, recheck the case mouth. But after every one with my primers, I do check to make sure that the primers are seated properly. Looks good. Alright, so looks good. I have not used the hand priming tool yet. I do plan on it. I honestly do not mind using the priming tool on the bench. Some people say it lacks feel, but I haven't had a problem with it. Alright, after I do a few of them, I'll go back and I'll recheck to make sure that the case mouth is still good to go. You know, I can get it started in there and keep going. So I'm going to finish out the rest of these 50, and then I'll get you guys back involved. Alright, just finishing up here. Pretty much have the last one going in right now. I will tell you, it doesn't take too long. It really doesn't. And everybody's like, oh, you should go with a turret or a progressive or something like that. Bottom line was, I was way too new, and I wanted to make sure I understood the concept of hand loading before I went to some kind of progressive. One, to make sure I could do it. Two, to make sure I liked it and enjoyed it. And honestly, doing the single, I feel like I can pay closer attention to each piece. So, alright, so that's going to be our 50 rounds of 40 Smith & Wesson, which are now primed and ready to be charged. So that's going to be our next step. Okay, one of the things I did purchase extra was a small little digital scale, and it was like 25 bucks. But I wanted to make sure that I was setting up the analog scale properly. So always the first thing that I do is I turn it on. I let it kind of heat up a little bit, and I'll hold down the mode and make sure it's calibrated. So I have my 50 gram. It says pass. Take it off. Put it back on. 49.99. Take it off. 50. Take it off. I'm going down to my grains. So what I am setting up right now is 5.1 grains is the magic number I'm looking for. A little bit on this. It was a little bit of a pain as expected from what was said by others, but if you can see, 5.1 grains what I'm looking for, so I go to the 5, and then I'm going to match up the center white line to what I want here. Hopefully you can see that. And I I use the digital scale to make sure I'm kind of on point. So first thing I do after I fill up the powder measure is I'm gonna just kind of go through the charging handle 10 times or so. I'll set this over there. Now I did already mess with the powder measure, so right now it shows 5.1, which is what we want. I want to make sure that it's set up on my analog scale as well. Come around, make sure you can see that. So we'll wait for that thing to settle down. Sometimes just put my finger up here like this and see where we're at. It's going to be pretty close to right on the money. So I've got a reading here, 5.1, and here's going to be 5.1. So I'm comfortable to move forward. And start charging my cases. They say this is the most important part, which makes sense because you don't want to double charge a case. So, move my tray here. I try to be consistent with it every single time on what I'm doing. So I'll go up, down, 2, 3, 4. Every casing is going to get a 4 tap. It's a little bit easier. Actually, what I'll do, I should have done this beginning, flipped them accidentally to make sure that you don't accidentally double charge a case. Alright, so as we go along, I'll know exactly where I left off. For some reason I get called to the other room. I have to leave. After I do about 10 or so, I'm going to recheck my weight. Alright, so I had some camera difficulties. Right here I'm going down to the last one here, finishing up. So I'm just going to kind of narrate what I'm doing. But as soon as I get done with charging all of these, I'm going to go through with a light and I'm going to make sure that each row I double check visually and make sure that there is not a double charge or anything like that. So they all look good. Now what I'm going to do is I take a look at them. You can see here I want to check each individual casing and place a round or a projectile in each one, and I want to get that preloaded. So I'll take my tray, I'll grab a handful of projectiles, and then just in case I have to I'll leave the room or I get called away, I don't have to worry about dust or grime or anything like that. So I'm going to put a projectile in each casing. Alright, so I got a handful of projectiles, and I'm going to start putting them in one by one, make sure they seat properly. You don't need much, you just need to put a little bit, just enough to get it started.